Ruth Bader Ginsburg refuses to let bullies kick her off the Supreme Court. She was slammed Republicans for insulting attacks. There was a senator who announced with great glee that I was going to be dead within 6 months. I'm very much alive. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Margot. How are you? Hi, Dale. Nice to see you back. Okay, please be patient. I'm going to go do a little bit of sharing and then I'll be right back. Okay. I also have to edit the live stream with some references for you as well. I guess I'll do that first before I share the stream. Hi, David Frank. Hi, Deborah Wilson. Hi, Ken Brown. Thank you all for coming. And hi again, Brad Byrne. Nice to see you all here. I'll be starting up in just a moment. I need to do some sharing.
Thank you all for coming. Okay, I'm back. Please let me know if you can hear me. And if you can see me. Can you hear me? Honey, can you hear me?
Not yet, I'm trying to get in.
Oh, thank you, Dolores. And can you see me? Thanks, Margot. Okay, then I think we're ready to start. Uh, I wanted to start by talking about two really terrible things that have happened. The first one is based on an article coming from Common Dreams. It was written by Jake Johnson. Title of it is "This Will Cause Irreparable Harm," unquote. Horror as Trump DHS as his DHS announces rule to allow indefinite detention of migrant families. Now, these migrant families, a lot of these migrant families are candidates for asylum in the United States. They have civil rights under our laws, under our treaties, which when we sign them become the law of the land. They have human rights that we must observe. So the rule the Trump administration just unveiled is certainly a violation of the human rights of those families. It's certainly a violation. The rule was announced by acting Homeland Security Secretary by Kevin McAleenan. I guess it's Kevin McAleenan. Yeah, McAleenan. Would terminate a 1997 court ruling known as the Floors Settlement Agreement. Floors bars the federal government from detaining immigrant children for more than 20 days. Now, that's a court ruling. It's a court ruling. I don't know that Trump has the legal right to terminate a settlement that came about through a court ruling. Now, the rule is supposed to be published in the Federal Register by the end of the week, and then there's a 60-day comment period. But this is not about a 60-day comment period. There's certainly going to be lawsuits that tie this up in court. It says the new regulation must also be approved by a federal court. Now, normally I trust the federal courts in this situation just to say no. But of course, Trump and Moscow Mitch McConnell have been packing the federal courts with their people. So God knows what's going to happen in the federal court now. Anyway, the Floors Agreement was put in place so that migrant children would not be indefinitely detained. As it is, they're being detained for months, and we already know that that's doing damage to these children that they will not easily recover from. So this is another horrific thing being done by an administration that appears to have no morality and an excess of pure meanness. This is terrible. You need to let your Congress people hear from you about this. And here's another thing that's terrible, and that appeared in Common Dreams too. And there was an article written by Andrea Germanis, and the title of that is U.S. Set to Blow Other Countries Away with Staggering Scale of New Oil and Gas Production. And the article starts off just a summary. Over next decade, unless its trajectory changes, 61% of new global production of oil will come from the United States. And there's a picture. I think I'm going to share the screen on this. I better get my transitions fixed here. So you see the photo of the oil well in Midland, Texas. Spewing forth smoke into a cloudy sky. Anyway, the article says, Kay, that a new analysis reveals that the United States is expected to be the main contributor to a looming carbon time bomb. Look, we're already being warned by Extinction Rebellion that within maybe 3 years now, the Arctic ice is going to disappear. We're already about to go past a critical point. A new report was released by human and environmental rights group Global Witness. The report sorry. The report, which I've now got onto the screen, let me see if I can adjust that for you. There are some interesting things to see in that one. Right. I've got that on screen now. Key findings: 61% of all oil and gas production in the world will come from the U.S. Total U.S. oil and gas production will increase by 25%. Our forecast output will be 8 times the forecast output of the next largest producing country, Canada, 20 times that of Russia, and more than 40 times the output from new fields in Saudi Arabia. Production from new fields in the U.S. in 2029 is said to be greater than the current output of all oil and gas fields in Saudi. There are some interesting graphs here for you to look at. Okay, this is linked from the article in Common Dreams. I'm not sure of the units here in this graph. Oh, yes, it's in millions of barrels of oil, okay, or equivalent. So this is 88 1,933 million barrels, okay, of oil, or in other words, almost 90 billion barrels of oil to be produced by the United States from 2020 to 2029. And there are the figures for other nations, okay, that were mentioned. Notice that when you go down the list of all these nations, there's no forecast for Venezuela, one of the largest oil producing nations in the world. Where are they in this particular forecast? Is there an implicit forecast here that they're not going to be producing anything because the United States will have taken them over? I mean, I don't know why Venezuela is not on this list. Anyway, though, another interesting aspect of these particular figures, okay, if you look them over, they're just very, very interesting. If we look at new oil and gas output, which is predicted for U.S. states, 40,261,000,000 barrels are forecast for Texas. Texas alone. That's nearly half of what the United States is alone. It's 4/9, okay, of what the United States alone was going to produce. 4 times as much as Canada is forecast to produce. Pennsylvania is projected to produce 10,465,000,000 barrels, or just a shade under Canada. New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, all will produce more oil than Brazil. Colorado will produce almost as much as Brazil and more than Russia. Where is this oil going to come from? Obviously, fracking. Fracking is built into these charts. Ohio, 3,972. These charts build in earthquakes all through the United States. Anyway, I wanted to call that to your attention. That is terrible. We need to shut that down. We need to stop it from happening. That the CO2 in that oil cannot go into the air. So, Global Witness, the authors of the report, say in a related briefing paper, the next president of the U.S. needs to have a credible plan for tackling climate change. And any credible plan to tackle climate change has to prevent the U.S. from drowning the world in oil or drowning ourselves in oil. The group lays out specific questions for candidates to answer. Maybe they can answer these questions in the CNN Climate Forum that's soon going to be coming up. What action do you intend to take to curb oil and gas production from public lands and waters? Will you end government subsidies for oil and gas production? How will you ensure the money saved actually benefits the communities affected? Will you commit to not approving new oil and gas pipelines, export terminals, and other infrastructure? How will you ensure your appointees to key agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of the Interior serve the public interest and not the fossil fuel lobby? And then there's an urging of the DNC to vote yes to holding a dedicated climate debate. And quote, presidential candidates should have the opportunity to clearly outline for the American people where their priorities lie and what their plan is to tackle this looming carbon time bomb, unquote. So, two terrible things reported on, okay, today. Both are things you should act on by calling your congresspeople or visiting them and pointing out that neither of these things can stand. Not the change in the detention rules for the migrants, and not the planned oil production that cannot go into the air or we're dead. I'm telling you. Our children and grandchildren are just going to be dead. That's what's going to happen. Okay, finally on to something more pleasant. Let me see that I've still got the screen shared for that. Okay, I'm going to make a change there because I didn't want to show it from the Common Dreams article platform. But where the article originally appeared at the American Prospect. Oh, gee. An ad. Wonderful. Sorry about that. But Oil of Olay calls at this site. Maybe I should go back to Common Dreams. So, the title of the article is How Elizabeth Warren Works the Political System. Pretty important, I think. The author is Dave Badayan, who's also the executive editor of the American Prospect. And you have a whole list of the places here that his work has appeared. I first encountered his work when he was at Fire Dog Lake, beginning, I think, in 2010 or late in 2009. He came to Fire Dog Lake Yeah, and he was an amazing writer there. He was covering the news for them. He had basically the news blog. In other words, the breaking news blog. He did 4 blogs a day there, every single day for years. And they were good. He's good. His detail is very, very good. He's extremely factual. Uh, he's a journalist of the old school. And right now, he's one of the best out there. So, he says he gets a little, shall we say, annoyed by trendy, overused terms like theory of change. But he thinks that you can build a theory of change. It's possible to build a thread like that with Senator Warren and take some lessons from her approach to politics, which is a combination of quiet skill with the bureaucracy, persistence, and the leverage of grassroots coalitions as outside muscle. I'll blow that up for you so you can see that better. And he says this is not innovative. But what sets Warren apart is that she uses the levels of power available to politicians with a platform in Washington, D.C. She recognizes that the position of senator allows for more than just what you vote on or what amendment you can write. It can be worked to achieve progress in ways large and small. He says Warren has been lumped in during the 2020 presidential primaries with Bernie Sanders, whose political approach during his tenure in the Senate, and Dave adds here that Bernie was more of a bureaucratic infighter in the House, where the rules better enabled him to pass amendments. But he says that his political approach during his Senate tenure involves employing the bully pulpit instead of trying to make change from the inside. He says Bernie focuses on approaches that may seem like an attempt to blur ideological differences between candidates, but they say something real about how Warren and Sanders would govern. And he points out that presidents can access a panoply of tools to make change through existing law without adding any new statutes in Congress. And by the way, you can see Trump doing that right now. And not to get any good results, to create results that are terrible, and to push our system closer and closer to fascism. I mean, this kind of imprisonment of migrants, they're rounding up and their imprisonment in the kinds of conditions that they're being placed in, this is like the fascist concentration camps. It really is. Okay, now I'm very sensitive about this. I'm not using the word, okay, in a loose way. Some of the concentration camps were death camps. But all the concentration camps were not. Concentration camps are where people of a particular political persuasion, okay, or ethnic identity, okay, are crowded into smaller spaces with lousy living conditions so the government can control them for its purposes. Those things on the border, those are as close to concentration camps as we've ever gotten here in the United States. They're on a par with the Japanese internment camps in the Second World War. They're a shameful step towards fascism in the United States. Anyway, going on with the article. And going away from Trump, the presidency is the biggest megaphone in the world. What approach gets taken does affect the tangible results of the presidency and how liberal populists can work through the formidable constitutional and political obstacles to progress. As president, Warren and Sanders might use both the megaphone and the bureaucratic scalpel. But what do we know already about their, theories of change? Last week, BuzzFeed ran a classic Warren story about how she helped ripped off students from for profit Corinthian colleges obtain debt forgiveness during the Obama administration. From the outside, he says, you would not necessarily know how deeply involved she was in that fight. It appeared that the Corinthian students organized among themselves, going on strike for an obscure debt forgiveness clause called defense to repayment, which is available if colleges defrauded them, as Corinthian clearly did, lying about their job placement statistics to put them on the hook for expensive loans. But months earlier, Warren and her staff identified defense to repayment as a vehicle to relieve the Corinthian students of their debts and got the education department to acknowledge it as a tool. Beyond this, she worked on the inside to get the department to encourage blanket loan forgiveness while slamming them in Senate floor speeches for dragging their feet. She used the nomination of John King as education secretary to extract promises on debt forgiveness for Corinthian students. She even intervened directly with President Obama to force the Treasury Department to refrain from hitting students granted debt relief with a big tax bill by treating it as earned income. They wanted to treat it as earned income. In the end, 30,000 students got their loans wiped out. That's a big impact. That's a big impact without ever passing a law. Having followed Warren's career from the beginning, I found the episode broadly reminiscent of other fights she has taken on where she worked to identify paths to progress and pursued them relentlessly. This is rooted in her and her staff's keen understanding of the economy and the policy options available to make it work better for the public instead of large corporate interests. Take, for example, and this is an area where Dave is very, very familiar with because he literally wrote the book on this kind of thing. Take, for example, the interstate Recognition of Notarizations Act, which passed both houses of Congress in 2010 with no fanfare. At the time, the foreclosure machinery nationwide had seized up because the banks were peddling phony documents to paper over critical errors in the mortgage recording process. They were peddling phony documents. They took them to court and used them to foreclose. Foreclosure fraud. It was rampant throughout the United States. Activists were concerned that the bill, which passed both houses of Congress in 2010, could be used to force courts to accept the fraudulent documents if they had a notarization from out of states. And they were afraid this would flush illegal foreclosures through the system. At the time, Warren was in the process of standing up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as an assistant to the president. She learned about the bill from then Ohio Secretary of State, Jennifer Brunner, and appealed directly to President Obama to veto it, as activists had been insisting. It was one of only two bills Obama vetoed in his first 6 years in office. That's an accomplishment. She got him to veto a bill, and that probably ended up saving a lot of foreclosures for people. Now, those foreclosures still went on because the banks used robo signing, so called, to forge these fraudulent documents, and they were accepted by many courts. But at least there wasn't a law that was underwriting an automated process where mortgages from out of state would basically be rubber stamped by local courts, okay, throughout the United States. So Warren wasn't able to stop the whole thing. The robo signing stuff was still devastating and cost many people their homes. Warren also worked behind the scenes to stop Larry Summers from becoming chair of the Federal Reserve, organizing Democrats on the Senate Banking Committee to oppose him. She's met personally with Postmaster General Megan Brennan to try to force her to honor a bargaining agreement with the American Postal Workers Union to initiate pilot programs for postal banking in 3 cities. Postal banking, a tremendously helpful thing to do for people who are unbanked right now, getting postal banks in all the cities in the United States and all the rural areas. Very, very important. Warren worked on the inside to get the Federal Reserve to sanction Wells Fargo for a litany of abuses, restricting the bank's growth and removing 4 board members. Warren's staff found that under a section of the U.S. Code, bank regulators had authority to remove members of a bank's board of directors if they engaged in unsafe or unsound practices. She stated this in letters to the Fed and in testimony, and finally got it to happen in Janet Yellen's final action as Fed chair. Warren's excoriation of Wells Fargo CEOs John Stumpf and Tim Sloan, also eventually led to their early retirements. This is just a sampling of Warren's actions, and it's not really the stuff of campaign ads. For one, some of the actions involved fighting her own party and the policy actions of someone who remains a popular president, but to the Democratic base. It's hard for her to tout fighting Obama, even when she was right on the policy. Absolutely. Moreover, quiet pressure from the inside doesn't show up on a key vote scorecard or as a bill becoming law. But Dave's point is you can do more in Congress than vote. You can use your position through hearings and letters and pressure that nobody sees to get things done. You sometimes have to be willing to criticize allies to do it. You need to deploy activists on the outside while working on the inside. But it can happen. You can also inspire change through loud and targeted yelling. Bernie Sanders has proven this, getting Amazon to raise the minimum wage at that company to $15 an hour after he introduced legislation called the Stop Bezos Act that would have taxed corporations for each dollar their employees obtain in government assistance. Of course, non-employee contractors that Amazon uses aren't eligible for that wage. Through his 2016 run for president, Sanders has moved the entire Democratic Party toward a more populist economic program. He has been skillful with the bully pulpit, and the pulpit gets much bigger when you're president. Warren uses public messaging in her crusades as well. And I have no doubt that as president, Sanders' aides would scour the U.S. code to make change if stymied by the political opposition. But the natural inclinations of the 2 senators are clear. Sanders works from the outside, Warren dives in to find ways to make progress. They can be complementary skills, and in a polarized country with lots of checks and balances, both will be important in the next Democratic administration. But to know where someone is headed, it's worth looking at where they've been. And this has been Warren's approach since before getting elected, knowing what levers of the administrative state to pull, and then using outside activism and insider relentlessness to get them pulled. It's a worthwhile quality in a chief executive, not least because it shows a desire to do something in office beyond getting re-elected. Yeah, I completely agree with him. It shows that, and it shows a great talent that she has. And that talent would be very, very well employed if she were Sanders's vice president. Sanders then could stay as the outside person and let her be the inside person, and she would do a hell of a job at that. And she would also be learning how to be the outside person that he is and be the heir apparent to his movement. One thing she really has to learn, though, is better foreign policy. She is terrible right now in the foreign policy area. But I think you can see from this article by Dave Dayen that he's in a way trying to paint a picture that they are a natural team and that she can really be a great help to him in pulling the proper levers of the administrative state to make progress and make things easier for him when he's politically blocked in various ways, and that he and she could work together to get things done in a very useful way, with him using the bully pulpit to move the Overton window much more towards the progressive side, while she works the inner levers to get results that are concrete and that also move the Overton window over to the left. So, this is a very, very valuable article, I think. I think you want to pay close attention to it, okay, and internalize it and realize the skill that Warren has in this particular area as exhibited from her past record, which Dave evidently has followed very closely over the years. So, okay, I hope you appreciated that. And that ends my more formal presentation for today. I will now consider your comments on it. And Russ says, that's disgusting. Oh, wait a minute. I've got to adjust my view here so that all you see is me again. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, while we're at it, I do want to remind you to please share, like, and subscribe, and please become a patron at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Thank you. You can see that, I think, a little more clearly now than you were able to before. But let me go back to the regular view here. And let me go back to Facebook itself and check out your comments. Brad Burns says, Trump, McConnell are all about stealing as much as they can. $775 a day per detainee. They're staying at the Waldorf Astoria. That's the only reason they're doing it. It's all about getting that money. I'm sure it is with them. I'm sure it is. They're looting. They're looting the state. Lana joined, and Russell says, no wonder the oligarchs are buying the governments like crazy. Oh, yeah. Susan Eldridge joined. She says she's getting, okay, an echo. I tried to eliminate it. I wasn't entirely able to do that. And Margot Shepard said, this is so upsetting. I can barely listen. I'll bet that Margot, well, I'm not sure whether she was talking about the problems, okay, of immigrants and the new rule by Trump, or whether she was talking about the oil production projections, okay, or exactly what you're referring to, Margot. But if you'd like to let us know, that would be good. And Margot also says that the opinion piece on Warren is interesting. Yes, it is very actually extremely interesting. I don't know whether Dave, the immigrants, okay, is what you're referring to. I thought that was awful and terrible. I thought, though, the one on oil was equally disturbing. Yes, it's Susan Eldridge is here, right? Yeah, right. So, okay, I don't know whether Dave is supporting Sanders or Warren, okay, or Tulsi Gabbard. I'm pretty sure that he's not supporting anyone who is to the right, okay, of Warren. Now he's obviously impressed with Warren's skills and her desire to help people at some level, which was manifested in the actions she took, both when she was part of the administrative state and when she was a senator. So I think that record speaks well for her. But I think the picture that Dave Dayen was painting there certainly seems to be one where he's envisioning a Sanders presidency with Sanders moving people and keeping the movement together to pressure the various people who need to be pressured and to strengthen the party structure, okay, as well, okay, and to protect it also from the interests and from the corruption, and where he is the principal motivator when it comes to driving the legislation from the outside, where she can certainly help with crafting the legislation and also with pulling strings on the inside to get progress made in situations where no legislation can be quickly passed, but still improving things in concrete ways for people. That is very, very important. And that would be a really terrific team effort, I think, when it comes to domestic politics. And I'll bet Warren is much more competent at moving the administrative state than Tulsi Gabbard. It would be because I think Tulsi just doesn't have that kind of experience. Hi, Dave Strider. So, uh, so I think Dave is painting a picture of Sanders as president and Senator Warren as his vice presidential pick. And I think things are likely to work out in that way. The way things are looking at present. Now, if Tulsi is able to get into the debates somehow, and they're making every effort to exclude her right now, but if she's able to get back in either in October or November, and she's able to make a very good impression and boost her standing, she seems to now be cracking the 2% barrier in many, many polls. So, I think that that is something that's going to be happening, that she's going to be breaking that barrier, and then she's going to start to rise. And I don't think it's going to take much to get her to the same level that say um, well, Mayor Buttigieg maybe somewhere around that level, and then as the months go by, maybe still higher. We have to see. But if she doesn't get to at least the Warren level in terms of the public opinion polls, then I don't think Bernie would consider her a vice presidential candidate. If he won, though, he might well consider her either for Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense. In both of those positions, she would be terrific, just really terrific. So Dave Strider says there's a big problem on the horizon. The federal government is moving to right to work. I don't think a federal right to work law is going to pass, Dave. I think the House is going to block that. In other words, that has to be instituted by federal law. I don't think it's going to happen. Any other comments? Dave says Tulsi is not exposing more truth. I'm not sure what you're driving at, Dave. But Dave Strider, this is. Was that a question? Okay, or was that a statement? I think she's been exposing a lot of truth in her campaign. If you're referring to truth with respect to Kamala Harris, I think she's a shoo-in for the. Okay, I think, but to get into the November debates, she'll certainly have the 2% at that time because she's right on the border now. She's qualified in two of the four polls that she needs. She qualified in the second poll today. And she still has 7 days, okay, until the deadline. So Dave says the VA is heading that way. I am on the front lines. I'm not understanding what you're saying, Dave. And Dave says, no, Tulsi will be putting the hammer down. So Russ says, got to call it a night. See you again soon. Okay, Russ, I hope to see you tomorrow. I'll be around. I'll be here again at close to 9 o'clock. Around the 9-ish hour. And I'll be back with some good stuff on the Sanders Democracy at Work plan and the Warren Criminal Justice Reform Plan. And we'll go through both of those. Okay. Thanks for coming, Russ. Have a good night. Any other comments, questions? Okay, if not, I will say good night. And end my stream now. Please share, like, and subscribe this. And please go to my Patreon page. Even $1 subscription will help. Thank you. And good night.